God, we all need that post-it. Okay, welcome my friends to the first Love Tutoring Book Club. It happened like this. Sarah and I had a conversation on LinkedIn. What was it, Sarah?
As in, what was the conversation?
Yeah.
I think one of us had someone other than us, a third party mentioned a book, I think, and then I said, "Oh my gosh, I need to read that." Then you said, "Love books," and then it was, "Let's have a book club," and then it was done. I think it was done within about 10 minutes, wasn't it? That's it.
It was done within about 10 minutes. And then we asked, and then what I did was I took my phone and I went to my bookcase and I pulled off all my favorite small and mighty books, took photos of them, said to Hannah, that's a year's worth of curriculum, schedule it. And now we have a book club. So it's come from passion and too much caffeine. And here we are. So I would love to know if anybody has looked at Ken Robinson's Imagine If. No pressure, oh, look at you, Sam. Yes, Anna's with us as well. Okay, so we are going to walk you through this book. We're going to tell you about it. We're going to share some highlights. And we're going to ask some questions to the people who have covered it. And we're going to allow the people who haven't to participate by asking those questions and exploring the topics together. Does that sound all right? Great. Now, Sarah and I have never run a book club before. Has anybody in this room ever run one or participated in a book club before? Great. Blind.
No challenge then. There's no expectations. Brilliant.
They don't know what they don't know, Sarah. We can really do anything in the session. But being the book nerds that we are, we'll probably all be fine. So, Sarah, do you want to sort of kick us off with some of your own insights and thoughts?
I don't have the book with me. I failed. Isn't that bad? I'm house sitting at my parents', so and I did not bring the book with me. But I met Ken Robinson a few years ago at the Education Festival in Wellington College, and he was just incredible. And it's one of those moments where you listen to someone speak and it is transformational. It completely changed my whole teaching practice and my approach to kind of pedagogy. So when Julia suggested this book, I can't believe I hadn't read it before. Which is incredible, really. So I think, bear with me, I think I read it 8 weeks ago, or not 8 weeks ago, whenever it was that we suggested this, that's when I read it. But for me, it was a sort of a call to action. That's what I kind of took from the whole book, a call to action and the importance of, I think, creativity and why it should be valued and why and the fact that it isn't in the current education climate and hasn't been, I think, for many years. And I think that's one thing that stood out to me. And then probably the other thing is that I think people, policymakers, underestimate what children are capable of, and we don't perhaps give them the opportunities that we ought to within education. So that for me, they were the big takeaways, I think.
Awesome. Thank you. Anna, would you and Sam, maybe Anna, go ahead. Would you like to sort of share with us what your initial insights were from the book, please?
I've just started this morning. I thought, should I go to this book club? Can I do another book club, another reading activity? And then I thought, I'll just start with a book. I'll download the sample on Kindle. And then obviously it wasn't just the sample I read on. So I've been reading a bit this morning.
It's very fresh.
It's very good. It's very pleasant to read. It's so well written.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that, I guess. I was just thinking it's going to be like some formative information, but it's very good. And interestingly, and this is a bit away from what we're talking about, but I'm currently writing a story which happens in a dystopic future. And the beginning of this book has given me amazing paths for my thoughts. And I just thought, well, is this such a win-win? Because I'm thinking about my education, but at the same time, totally unrelated. I'm getting the bonus. I think it is a book that will stir you, will make you think, and will make you ask questions. So I'm looking forward to, I'll probably have it read by next week fully. At the moment,
Fantastic.
I'm just,
Fantastic.
first
But
quarter.
I love the synchronicity of seeds sown and
Mm-hmm.
where
Yes.
they flourish.
Yes,
Sam,
you never know.
Sam, what's your initial insights?
I am an awful person to ask about this book, quite frankly. Firstly, I've read it,
value you are.
and all of those post-it notes, look at those. Those are all things that made me angry.
Oh!
And there's only one thing that this man and I agree on. The idea that really change has to come from grassroots level, that's pretty much the only thing we agree on. Everything else, down to who he is, his career, his life, are things that I have issues with. I'm sorry. Wrong person.
No, please
to
don't
ask.
apologize. It would be a very, very boring book club if we all agreed.
I'm not saying there's nothing worth reading in there. There's definitely stuff worth reading in there. And certainly if you've not read this sort of thing before, then definitely it's a nice, easy read, worthwhile overview. Absolutely. So for anyone who's not read it, I would encourage you to do that. And if you're like me, you can just disagree with the author constantly for the entire thing.
Okay, come on, open some of those post-its and let us know what's going on in there, please.
So I had a couple of, if you want to start right at the very beginning, his view is incredibly Eurocentric. So he's talking about Western Europe, in terms of, what am I on? I am on, I can read you. Would you like me to read you a little bit?
Definitely.
A tiny bit.
In which language, Sam?
English.
Okay.
Today. He wrote it in English. So he's talking about the Enlightenment. He's talking about the shift that brought in human thought, challenging age-old dogma, and this brought the cascade of discoveries and inventions that leads to the first industrial revolution, all of which is good Western European history, is absolutely correct. And that improved conditions and it improved education. Not wrong, but those advances in thinking, in philosophical thought, in medicine and in science that happened in the Enlightenment in Western Europe, a lot of those things had already been achieved in China, for example, a couple of centuries earlier. And actually, you know, I realise he's a white bloke living in England and his background is in white European academia, but we kind of need to be thinking broader than that if we want revolution, right? You can't start a revolution with the same old stuff that you've always been thinking about.
Sarah, I'm going to invite you to dive in here.
Yeah, I think they're all valid points, but I think you start from what you know, don't you? And what he was saying after with all our futures, back when I was getting involved in that program and I was a teacher, that was, I think, revolutionary enough. This idea of how we ought to. I'm not going to talk about how the education system is still very much based on coming in from the fields at whatever time and factories, but I think there has to be a point where you can't. He speaks from his experience as a teacher, as a professor, working in schools, and that I really value, and it definitely affected my teaching practice in terms of I think the creativity that I brought into my lessons that wasn't there before, and we didn't have that kind. We were moving away from the literacy hour and the numeracy hour. So what you're saying, Sam, I'm not disagreeing with at all, but I think you have to start somewhere. And for me, when I was in the classroom and I was teaching year 2, and suddenly there was this voice that was telling us that, or showing us a different way of doing it, and that it benefited the children, it almost, for me, it didn't matter whether or not this is something that should have come from a more global voice or a more outside of the UK, because all I could see was the impact it was having on the children I was teaching, and that it reminded me of what I went into teaching for. So perhaps my little lens is much smaller, in that I was just looking at the impact that it had on the children I taught and my pedagogy. I haven't necessarily grappled with, well, it was all already being done in in China or Southeast Asia, however many years ago, because I suppose that wasn't relevant to me at that point. And I think you're always going to leave things out. You're always going to be neglecting other viewpoints or other kind of worldviews. And I think there's no getting around that. But when I've rewritten curricula at school, you adapt with the times. So what I taught in 2000, or perhaps my views in 2000, were very different to how they are today, because I've learned more and I've gone out and read more. And I think that's, if that's a starting point, and I've gone off on something here, but I think you have to start from somewhere. And for me, he spoke to me as a teacher, and I adapted my practice. And I think the children benefited because of that.
So it's fascinating how personal it gets, and how quickly it gets personal. I just messaged Sam separately to say how much I appreciated the insight and bringing a theme around decolonizing the curriculum, or decolonizing our thinking around education, is blooming marvelous. That's exactly where we want to be in a conversation. But we also want to be really, really personal and let the book join us where we are and move us forward from there. So I think two really, really interesting things have already happened. But I do think that, and reflecting back on the way Anna said, it's already opened avenues for my thinking, and it's a book that's designed to inspire and help. This is Ken Robinson's final book. So the story of this book is that he wrote it with his daughter, and he didn't finish it before he passed away, which was during COVID. And when you listen to the audiobook, it's read by her, it's read by Kate. And the preface says, I promised my father that I would continue his work. And the introduction says, the revolution is already happening. So what I like about this book is that it speaks as a call to action, but he says that he's written it sort of as a letter, as a summary of all his thinking. And if you want to know more about his thinking, go into this book or that book or that book that he's written over the course of his life. This is doing something very specific, which I actually think really speaks to Sam's point about, does it do what it's supposed to do? If this book is supposed to inspire us to change education, make it more person-centered, make it more less industrialized, does it do what it's supposed to do? So I have a problem, because I've only got 3 people in this room to ask the question of. So I wonder whether at this stage we could sort of pivot the conversation and actually ask Dee, Caroline, Brian, Andrea, Julie, Carol, Elizabeth, if they want to ask some questions about this thinking or share parallel insights on the conversation. If you haven't read the book, this is your time to speak. Okay.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can. How are you doing, Andrea?
Hi, I'm really good. I'm in Leeds, and I'm 64. I'm a retired teacher, and before that, I in Leeds, and before that, I was in London for 12 years, studying nutrition, being a dietitian and a secretary, and etc. And I can talk now. In the 1990s, when I started teaching, I had no confidence in myself, but by now, I can speak a lot. I was diagnosed about 3 years ago with adult ADHD, and I've been able to really do my human revolution and turn it around, and I can speak now. So just 2 things that I want to say.
Thank you for that introduction to you, Andrea. I really appreciated it. Thank you.
That human revolution. That's because in 1988, can I say 2 things?
Please. There was a lag there in time. Please do. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, because that was to say that I can talk a lot now, and I have got my confidence. And I love teaching. I love children. And I taught early years and English as an additional language and movement play. And well, the two things, the one was that second ward.
Andrea, I'm really sorry. I have to pause you because as much as I want to hear your contribution, the reception is so bad that it's actually becoming difficult for us to follow what you're saying. If you're able to join us on another line or find a way to improve your Wi-Fi, I'm actually
creating. Okay, I don't mind. I don't.
I just took a difficult decision to mute Andrea because I need to keep the conversation going. But Andrea, if you're able to come back with better reception, please do. Okay. Andrea's point, I think, was about personal revolution, and I think that will be really, really interesting to hear about. I thought maybe I would give you a little bit more of an overview of Imagine If, for those of us who haven't read it yet. And I think that the most useful way of doing that is to show you the journey that the book takes us on. The chapters are titled with little overviews that I think are really powerful. So let's go through them one at a time. The first statement is the human advantage. Imagination is what separates us from the rest of life on Earth. It is through imagination that we create the worlds in which we live. We can also recreate them. Sam, do you have any post-its on that? I'll say it to you again. Imagination is what separates us from the rest of life on Earth. It is through imagination that we create worlds in which we live. We can also recreate them.
I don't disagree.
Okay.
I don't think he's wrong.
Okay.
I understand that primary age children have an access and a comfortability with imagination that maybe older students don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of experience here because primary isn't really my bag. I've done some primary. It was all right. We got on fine.
Okay.
I moved on.
So what about this last sentence? We can also recreate them.
Recreate? What are we recreating?
I know some people in this room who have recreated themselves more than once in the last 18 months. Yeah, there's right. There's pointing out that our human advantage is recreation is, for me, a very helpful statement. What are your thoughts?
That's one thing to recreate an individual, as was it Andrea said to us so very nicely. It's one thing to kind of recreate an individual, especially if that is yourself. Extending that influence outside of yourself is perhaps a harder task, I would suggest.
Oh, okay. So chapter 2 starts like this. It's called The World We've Created. And his phrase is this: the human world is shaped by the ideas, beliefs, and values of human imagination and culture. It is created out of our minds as much as from the natural environment.
Yes, that's I would agree. Absolutely.
I'm waiting for somebody else to jump in and say, yes, I do, or no, I don't understand, or I disagree. Chapter 3 says you're more than you think. Intelligence is diverse, dynamic, and distinct. Intelligence and creativity are blood relatives. One cannot exist without the other. Caroline, go for it. I can see that you've unmuted.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking about it in terms of it's almost like a muscle. The creativity is like a muscle, and quite often we become trained out of it. And in early years and in the youngest parts of primary education, creativity is the thing, and we play and we learn through play and imagination and putting ourselves into other people's shoes and pretending to be a fireman and all of those things, and by creating things. And we sort of, for a lot of people, we almost train ourselves out of it, and we have to practice it in order to become more creative in a way, because there's an element of danger as well about being creative, because you're doing something slightly different. So there's an element of danger about my job because I'm doing something very different, and not everybody gets it. And so there's an element of danger that I'm never going to earn any money, but there we are. But there's this element of danger about, well, what will other people think? Will it be okay? Is it okay to paint my hair, to put this person with green hair just for fun? So this morning I was with a group of parents in school, and we were exploring the idea of making things to sell, okay, in a self-reliant group, so that we could, using what we've got, just make stuff that's attractive that we could make a tiny percentage of profit on. And that idea. And I literally just gave them, and I give them stuff every week, different stuff. I just gave them a smorgasbord of random craft materials. And some of them were, last week I'd given them empty tiny jam jars and stickers and paints and stuff and said decorate them. And for quite a while, they sit there going, I can't do this, I don't know what to do. And then somebody starts and somebody makes an idea. And it's almost like they're giving themselves permission to play as an adult, because they've been so out of tune with that idea of being creative, that they've forgotten. But as soon as they start and they get going and they realize it doesn't matter, it's fine, let's just play, let's just try stuff, let's think in a different way, they suddenly come out of themselves and become a new person. And it's quite magical to just watch them change within an hour, from being really sat really still and quiet going, I don't know what to do, I can't imagine what to do, to having a play and making random little people with green hair and googly eyes and sticking it on top of a pen and going 50 pence, thank you, or whatever, you know. And it's through that creativity and play that we learn,
I love
think,
that,
become ourselves.
One of the reasons that I started Qualified Tutor was because I realized that parents don't understand their children as learners. And anything that we can do as tutors to close that gap and create clarity around that is really, really important. And what you've just said about opening the parent's experience to what play feels like is massive for the child, that they're, you know, you've definitely seen that you know, that early years poem that says, don't ask me what the worksheet looks like. Look at my hands, look at my t-shirt. What I've done today is on me, is in me. It's not just a worksheet that I completed, right? Somebody brought to a loved one of mine recently the phrase, you're supposed to be a human being, not a human doing. Yeah, there's so much doing that we think that we're supposed to be involved in as adults, and that a little bit more being would probably serve us well.
Can I say something, Julia?
Of course. And I'm coming to you in just a second.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll try not to forget.
I won't forget. Go
no,
ahead.
Me.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Okay, thanks. It's just this thing between, and it's about play, and it's about a lovely thing that I think everybody enjoyed in early years, was setting up a little station where, for imaginative play, where everything is tiny and micro. You know, it might be about volcanoes or autumn, but there are little people, and you know, you've things, and they can do things, and they can, you know, bring things from other tables to it. And parents can come in and bring things, and you know, if it's about ancestors, you know, or old people or old toys, etc., everyone can take part. But the opposite of that, which I have seen in creativity, is like macro. The people come in with bamboo cages and everybody makes a dinosaur or a crocodile, you know, everybody makes what the educationers have all imagined, and it's beautiful, and the children stand round and they stick on, you know, coloured paper that they're told to from the green basket or the pink, you know, and it looks beautiful, and then they all, you know, they do a play about it and it looks great. But, you know, that's somebody else's imagination pressed upon them, and from something that they do themselves, they can start writing their own stories and making their own books, and that's Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that point about being open-ended is really, really important, and not having an agenda. And to dial right back to what Sam said about, this being a grassroots change, that there's the call to action of this book has to be with no agenda, it has to be open-ended. And that's what speaking to creativity and play feels like. I think it's also useful to remember that this is a change that has to happen for us as well as for our children. The change of education has to start with us. Anna, what are your insights?
Yeah, just wanted to say earlier, when I say not to forget, I meant not to forget what I was going to say, not you forgetting about me. Sorry. No, I was just going to say that for me, my creativity, it's a bit like a sourdough starter. If you don't feed it, it languishes. You need to keep it in very, very good shape and fed. And after I had children, I really struggled because my life became a lot of doing and not very much of thinking, even though they were having their fun, but I was like providing for them. And so more recently, I forced myself, and it felt like an effort initially, to do creative tasks that don't give me any tangible benefit, as in I don't get paid for it. I started going to the art school 2 years ago. So on Wednesday morning, I was doing painting and drawing, and I don't do it very well, but it doesn't really matter. In fact, I think it's really good that I don't do it very well, because I can fully relax while I'm doing it. Nothing happens. I just talk to people. I'm just there in the room, in the moment, enjoying it. And I think sometimes we need to make sure that as children grow up, they don't lose that. Often with academic exams and very strict goals for their learning, we are killing their creativity. And I wouldn't do that to myself. So why would I do that to my own students?
This is going to bring tears to your eyes, Anna.
Well,
my 11-year-old is, so he's just started year 7, and he's learning the new behavior management system in his secondary school.
Mm-hmm.
All day long, he gets positives and negatives from the teachers. And I get emails, pings all day long. Positive behavior alert, negative behavior alert. It's like the feedback loop is so fast that it's exhausting him. And he is so aware of getting negatives and positives and positives and negatives all day long. They are knocking the confidence out of him by judging him constantly.
Yeah, you don't need that.
It is so bizarre to see it happening in real time.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very strange, yes, overwhelm. Absolutely right, Julie.
Interestingly, somebody must have made a lot of money from selling that program to the school.
I know.
And making them believe that they need it, because that takes some infrastructure. Yeah.
Well, and if you think about the position of weakness,
such a shame
that such a system comes from. Yeah, it's instead of relationship, that system. And it makes me very sad. Sarah, you do look rather ghostly. Oh, what happened?
Well, alarms going. It's not my house, so I've got alarms blaring and everything's switched off, and things are linked to various places that people might turn up. So I've just had to go and deal with that.
Okay, that sounds very exciting. You look extreme. Yeah, you are. You're very science fiction right now, my darling. I feel like we shouldn't have done a non-fiction today. We should have done science fiction.
Maybe. Should have done.
Okay, I'm going to catch you up on what we're doing right now.
Thank you.
It happens to be that there are these gorgeous little summaries of each chapter. We're moving through them, so it's almost like we're reading the book in summary here. And we've got to the point of understanding the importance of creativity and play, and understanding that intelligence requires creativity. The phrase is that they're blood relatives. And now it starts getting systemic. So it's looking at the systems that we're living in. So chapter 4 is called The Promise of Education. And he says, education must enable students to understand the world around them and the talents within them so that they can become fulfilled individuals and active, compassionate citizens. Sam, do you have a post-it note on this?
I am just fixing some problems in the chat where I've been trying to respond to Julie, and I've actually been sending those to you instead because I don't know why, but I've just fixed that. Julia, Julia, that's my
promise of education. So let's pivot to somebody else. And Sam, if you want to come back to us, you're very, very welcome to. The promise of education as enabling students to understand the world around them and the talents within them so they can become fulfilled individuals and active, compassionate citizens. Do we agree? Do we disagree? Has he missed something out? Is it a helpful summary?
Sounds nice to me.
Me too.
I like the compassionate and the active, and the fact that they're not going to be, little 4-year-olds for very long, but they'll be the same person, just with more, flesh and blood and more experiences. And if they can continue to be, educative and insightful and enable them to really, I think, one thing, to be able to say what they want and not be laughed at or put down.
So advocacy, being able to speak up for yourself. For me, there's something very interesting in this summary, in the way that it talks to the person on the inside and their relationship with the world at large. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
I don't want to kind of go off on a tangent here, and I look really strange. I'm so sorry. I feel like there we go, back again. I was thinking about, because my husband's Swedish, and how different the Swedish education system is, and how the children have agency in a way that I don't think we have in the same way here. And I think partly that's because they have a slightly different, their society is different to ours in the way that they have sort of collective response, sort of a collective responsibility in the way they treat each other and the ethos of the schools. But they value creativity. They start school properly when they are, rising 8. And we are constantly having debates in our household about the differences between our education system and I'm obviously heavily involved in sort of the private education system, so and how that's different again from the Swedish system. I've completely forgotten your question, Julia, but I have just been mulling over this idea of what should an education be for, and I very much think that in Sweden they are enabling children to engage with the world around them in a way that I feel that perhaps we are lacking here. And I'm sure there's something about that in the book, so I'm sorry if I can't quite
yes
remember.
There is. It's the next chapter. You teed me up perfect.
You're joking. Did I actually
Chapter
set
5,
that up? Well done me.
From
Thanks.
the factory to the farm. We are depleting our human resources in the same way we are depleting the Earth's resources. Our future depends on tackling both crises urgently. And I will tell you something really important that he says in there, which is it's the human future that needs to be worried about. The Earth will survive. It will, whether we're here or not, the Earth will be fine. It's our survival that we need to advocate for. It's us that will become extinct unless we do things differently. And the interplay between education and ecology is fascinating. Sam is scowling. Sorry, Sam, I'm actually using you in this conversation. I hope you forgive me. It is really useful to have a counterpoint, because otherwise I sound like an absolute loony.
Whilst I don't disagree that environmentalism is clearly very important,
okay,
and I do also agree that the planet will be absolutely fine, it's us that we need to worry about. If we change the environment to such a point that we can't survive as a species, then we're probably pretty doomed, right? That all good stuff, all nice and solid. And also, I do agree that if you change the way people are educated and the way that they think, you're likely to produce societal change, which could positively impact the whole environment thing, right? I'm good with all that. I just felt like this chapter in the book was somewhat shoehorned in. Like, oh, we need to talk about the environment, people. That's important. How can we fit that into educational revolution?
So for me, this was the best chapter of the book, Sam.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's almost like maybe there's a different book that I should have read that this one was shoehorned in from. But for me,
that was kind of the concept of the book, isn't it? So this is like an overview of his other stuff.
Yeah.
And if you like those particular chapters, then you go off and read the other stuff.
Sort of, but that concept doesn't exist anywhere else. So, spoiler alert, Dee, Andrea, Brian, Julie, Carol, Elizabeth, forgive me. Spoiler alert, what he says here that I find crazy exciting is the idea of, he talks about rewilding. He talks about industrialized systems and industrialized farming, and how the problem with that is it treats children as products. Yeah. And it maximizes outcome without focusing on well-being. And then he talks about organic farming, and he talks about rewilding and how effective that is, and the knock-on effect of that. Brian, I feel like your sociology brain is way more equipped for this than mine. But then he says, wouldn't it be interesting if we had an approach to education that was rewilding, right? If we could rewild education so that outcomes were far more diverse, and that we had a regard for the child in the moment as well as who they're going to be when they're older. And that it was gentler, as you've heard me say before, gentler on the adults as well as the children. I find that a very, very beautiful concept. Is there anybody else that resonates with, or the opposite? Do you want to put a post-it note? Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
No, I was just going to say, related to this, is that I think one of the impediments to this rewilding is the ratios that we have in the classrooms. It is very difficult to give freedom and rewild when you have one person guiding or taking care of 30 other people in a room. It really, I think the ratios need to be looked at the same time as we look at what is done in the lesson and the ethos of the school even.
I really like Anna's point. I think this whole conversation needs to be a lot more nuts and bolts. If you want educational change, which I totally agree is long overdue, unless there is real systemic level change, grassroots is fabulous. Individual practitioners, who was saying, was it you, Sarah, was saying this changed your individual practice, the way you responded to education. That is marvelous. I'm sure that made you brilliant at your job and supported the children that you were looking after. And that is really, really good. But if we want to spread those benefits through millions of children, then you are looking at system level change. And the question is how?
Yeah, the structure of the classroom itself is a problem. The 30 people sitting down, which has not been like this throughout history. It's quite a novel concept, everyone just sitting there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Brian, dive in.
Yeah, I have not read the book. I've come across Ken Robinson on his TED Talk, which is I've just checked, it's had 23 million views.
That's all, yeah.
About whether schools kill creativity.
That's right.
When I first saw that, I thought it was a really good talk, and then I've seen it a few times since. I don't like his delivery. He's kind of trying to be funny too often, a bit too much. But as Sam was saying, I'm really nodding along to what Sam was saying this minute ago. Is that what he's suggesting is what we all agree. Yeah, we would love to have more creativity in classrooms. We'd love to have kids enjoying themselves and all the rest of it. But that's not the real world, unfortunately. In schools, especially in secondary schools where I've been teaching for 30 years, that is not the system or they talk about it as if, head teachers say to us all about build up relationships with kids and get on well with them, bloody all the rest of it. And then at the end of the day, they just want to know about our exam results. And it is, secondary schools are becoming a factory, or have become a factory over the last however many years. And it's all very well for us sitting here, or even teachers say, we don't want this system. Who's changing it? There's no one. I know you are.
No. We all are. We all are. I tell you what he says here. I'm skipping to chapter 8. He says, rock and roll was not a government-led initiative. Revolutions do not wait for legislation. They emerge from what people do at the ground level. And so I would love to throw the how back.
I would love to say that that is a dreadful analogy. Rock and roll was a huge movement that appealed to millions of people, had a real beat to it that would get lots and lots of people engaged and involved. Everybody has ears, can listen to music. Let's scale that down. How many people are really interested in the nuts and bolts of education?
Maybe the nuts and bolts of education aren't interesting enough. Maybe this is the conversation. Somehow we moved from over-intellectualized classical music to rock and roll appealed to the masses in the way that classical music didn't. I'm not sure it's a bad analogy. I think that music touches everyone in the same way that education touches everyone. And I think that if we could bring education to make it as relevant as a rock and roll beat was to that generation that first heard it, why isn't that exactly what we're supposed to be doing here? Why aren't we supposed to be making education so very much more relevant and compelling?
So back to the how. I mean, education is
Can
relevant.
I say something?
Andrea, please go ahead. We've muted ourselves so that we can hear you.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can remember. Ooh, it is. Oh yeah, it's about relationship. It's about this, when I was at school in primary school, it was excellent, actually. It was so good. And they had 40 children in a class, and they were able to, they obviously had staff meetings where they discussed the children. It was a working class school in South Leeds, Hunslet and everything. And there was racism. I was the only black child in the felt like in Leeds, but I wasn't living in Town where the carnival was and everything. So I was there. But they were fantastic. And because I've got, ADHD, I have a photographic memory. I'm blessed. I can remember everything. So I can remember what happened at nursery. I can remember at school, times when that made me think, what? That's not kind. They're not being kind. To young Glyn, he goes to the Salvation Army. He sings in a deep voice. Don't tell him off for, not singing thank you for the world so sweet in a high voice. But, so I kind of, when was a good child, clever, gifted, could paint and speak. I'd arranged a play when I was 6, and they went along with me. I just went in one day and said, yes, I've written a play. I want to be the director. And, and I've done the casting, blah. And it was about a magpie and a princess and a ring. And, anyway, they let us in assembly have the wedding scene.
That sounds absolutely gorgeous, Andrea. And
they were so
I
kind.
think to your point of, 40 children in a class and it can still be done well is important. It's absolutely important. The assumption is not that only one-to-one or small group education is going to be effective. And I love that you can remember those years. Anna, what's your contribution here?
I was going to say, and I need to apologize, first of all, to Sam, because she might think I'm going all the white old man Western direction. But if we look at the origin of the word for school, even in antiquity, school in Greek, schole, means leisure time. And I think we've lost that meaning has been lost over time. It doesn't really obviously mean a leisure anymore, but I think we should recover a little bit or re-explore the idea that you go to school because you're lucky enough that you're not having to work and you have time to develop yourself.
You're talking about school as a privilege and an opportunity.
Because it is. Well, it should be rather than a punishment. It shouldn't be taking a pig and farming it. It should be, there's your free space, go and roam.
Absolutely. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking what you were saying about it being a privilege, and how I think 80% of my students live in China, and they very much see their school life as a privilege, and they it's not just about them being conscientious. They know that if they don't work hard, there's nothing necessarily at the end of that, and it's just made me consider perhaps how, how do we view it in this country? And I was just thinking before about policies and what policies need to change. And my sister's just been offered a job as a kind of a change maker and being able to get involved in that kind of policy writing. And yeah, my head is now just completely scrambled. So I've gone from at the outset thinking, right, Ken Robinson is a guru and it's going to change the world, to actually how are we going to affect change, and what role do we play as tutors? And yeah, I feel like I just need to sit and take notes now. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just
So
my brain.
I wanted to pick up on your point about policy making and grassroots. Policy making is fabulous, and this is why I think I agree with Ken, is that grassroots is the way forwards, because education and social change go hand in hand, really, societal and social change. And if you're going to talk about change, making policy, top down is good. You can relieve some of the pressure on schools for things like heads looking just for examination results that we've heard about from Brian, or you can relieve some of the pressure on teachers. Individualization is very hard in a large class, like Anna mentioned. Policy will relieve some of those pressures, but unless you do Julia's thing of rock and roll and the grassroots, right, unless you go down that road, you're not going to take the good people of Britain with you, and ultimately it's their attitudes as parents that will shape how will shape, you were talking about your students in China and their attitude to learning and that cultural background. Well, that cultural change is only going to come if you take the grassroots with you. I'll give you a fabulous example. I have a local neighbour who specialises in repairing washing machines. And his dad...
I missed that. In repairing?
Washing machines.
Washing machines.
Who could live without a washing machine? His dad was a tradesman whose wife always did his invoices for him because he couldn't read or write properly. He is a tradesman who has his accountancy farmed out because he can't deal with numbers, like reading and writing good, numbers not so much. Okay. His son, when we were having this conversation, he was repairing my machine, was in school and was 17, so about to go into year 12 in college, and had failed his GCSE maths. And the attitude that was presented to me that I just nodded along with was, well, I've done just fine without maths. My numbers are rubbish. Oh, that's what the accountant's for. He won't be resitting. That's a waste of time. He doesn't want to do it. And unless you change at grassroots level how people feel about the education of their children, how people feel about how society feels about education in general, then you can't take everybody with you. And that's what education is about, isn't it?
Fantastic. And I think it's true that we can't take everybody with us in one direction. And I think that what's interesting about the invitation from Ken Robinson is to suggest that there's more than one direction. I think that defining education is harder than we realize. We started off by talking about how Western this point of view is, and Sarah sort of come full circle with her perspective on what's supposed to happen here. You spoke about privilege and what education's for. I once interviewed somebody who said, our children are our best asset. And I thought that was a really interesting phrasing, and it's definitely not where I'm coming from as a parent, to think of a child as my asset, or as a society's asset. And I think that's, on the one hand, we're talking about children being seen as products, and on the other hand, we're seeing them as, assets for the future. And maybe there's another way. I would love to suggest that you cannot be given a job as a change maker. You have to step forward. And we've been taught to wait for permission. We in this room were probably all quite good at school, and we were probably taught to wait for the bell to ring, to wait for somebody to choose you, to get a pat on the head for compliant behavior. And actually, the point of this conversation that we're having is to choose ourselves and to say, what book do we want to read? What change do we want to make? And so on that point, I'm going to do two things with our last 10 minutes.
Julia, can I interrupt really quickly? Sorry, just really, really quickly, just 2 seconds, because something that you and Sam said made me think about the Love Tutoring Festival and the conversations that you were having between you and Alison Peacock. And I wrote some notes because that's the kind of person I am. And I was just trying to find it on my phone. And you spoke about that one of our jobs is to kind of step out as tutors, to step out into the unknown and create something fresh, which really resonated with me. And that we have a responsibility to close those relationships between communities, whether that's parents and schools or policymakers and schools, and that makes us stronger and it makes the outcomes better for children. And that we can lift limits to a point, but things happen very, very slowly. And sorry, I just as an aside, carry on. Just sat with me.
Thank you. And I love that the conversations join up, right? Because we are nothing if not consistent and repetitive. My lovely friends, can you please give me some suggestions of books that you would like to propose for the Love Tutoring Book Club? Books that you've read that you believe would support us as a collective in exploring together. Are there any suggestions?
I have some great businessy ones, but they're less educational, so I don't know how. Let's start with Why, Simon Sinek.
Yeah, classic.
And on that note, I'm going to have to race off, Julie, because I'm teaching in 4 minutes. So whatever it is, I will read it, obviously, but thank you.
You're the best. See you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Sam?
I was just going to say, I have no suggestions. I am here to find out what you all read.
Awesome. Okay, well, I will tell you what we are going to be reading next month. This is the first book that I read on building a business from my kitchen table. And it is, so Build a Business from Your Kitchen Table is written by the two people, Sophie Cornish and Holly Tucker, who created notonthehighstreet.com, which is a lovely website that allows makers to reach purchasers. It's a little bit like, my brain's just gone. What's the other one? Etsy, thank you. And I think it preceded Etsy. And there's something very British about this book, which made it very easy for me to read. There are two girls from London who, one did go to university and one didn't, and one was working in PR and the other was working as an estate agent. And they came together with this idea of bringing voices together and making those people who were working in their shed visible to those people who wanted to buy nice things for their family. And so you can see that the comparison between what we do at Qualified Tutor and what this business does. But really, this was people who worked really, really hard and had courage of their convictions. And it's a very how-to book, but it's also a lovely read. It's gentle. So if you would like to get hold of this book, which I think is quite old now, and I think that Holly Tucker actually has a whole supporting small businesses a website and program now that you might want to explore. I thought it would be a lovely read for next time. My goal is to intersperse education and business thinking through these conversations, because we as tutors are we're sort of running on both tracks at the same time. But I'm not going to bring you the big heavy books, although we can talk about them. I think the light ones are a more realistic request. So are there any insights or suggestions? Anna, please.
No, this is just a logistical question. I should have read it somewhere, but if I have, I've forgotten. Does this book club meet once a month and we talk about the book and then you have a month to read the next book? Is that how it will work? Okay.
That's exactly right. So it's once a month and the entire calendar is available for you to have a look at under the book club list. And it's always on a Thursday at 11. Sam, what are your thoughts?
Second logistical question, will you be posting the book for each month as you go on the community somewhere?
It's all there already.
Okay.
Where it is is always a question that confounds me. It's definitely on the website because I saw that this morning. But the entire calendar, oh, I know what, Hannah puts it on the newsletter. So there's a little Love Tutoring Book Club section on the newsletter, and it gives you the entire calendar. She's even given you Amazon links. She's awesome. That's basically the most forward planning I've ever done in my existence. I don't even know when my children's birthdays are, Sam, but I do know which books we're doing.
I don't actually believe that you've never forward planned that much, because you used to be a school leader and that involves huge amounts of forward planning.
You're so right. It's
there
just
that
that in those days, what I was 3 months ahead of everyone else. But that's not the same as planning ahead. I just was in that place. It's like people who write, magazines for the summer at Christmas time and the other way around. Brian, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that book you've just mentioned is currently 99p on Kindle on Amazon.
Thank you.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah, it's because they heard about
99. I've just looked it up. It's 99p on Kindle.
There you go. Easy peasy. I feel like there was something else that I wanted to share with you. Yes, I wanted to let you know that we have exceeded our ticket limit for the autumn Love Tutoring Festival, and we've extended it. So we've got more spaces for you. So if you haven't yet booked in for the Love Tutoring Festival, which is the 23rd of November, it's entirely online and entirely free for absolutely anybody to join, as long as they love tutoring. Then you can go ahead and book that ticket as well. Is there anything else you wanted to say before I send us all off? Thank you for a lovely, lovely conversation. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very
thanks,
much,
Anna.
everyone.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Andrea. And thank you, LinkedIn people.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. John.